Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm Malek Alqadi. I'm an architectural designer and founder of Folly. I have an architecture and design studio here in Los Angeles, and we explore off-grid work, farm master planning, ranch design, residential, private works, hospitality, and we explore these various topics through different architectural applications. And in today's podcast episode, I'm joined here with John Buffini discussing the topic of nomads and how we are inspired by their culture, lifestyle, and resilient structures.
Good morning. I'm an expert in human design the last 20 years. I have to say that this is a particularly interesting subject because it's reminding us of freedom. It's reminding us of being in nature. It's reminding us of an alternate culture. Malek, for me, I've experienced the nomad lifestyle in Ireland by watching the nomadic Romani people, but you've experienced it in Jordan with Bedouins. Let's speak first on Jordanian nomads in terms of Bedouins. What do you know about them? What's the allure for you? Why don't you elaborate on that for us?
I mean, I know that the Bedouins, they originated back like 8,000 years ago, and they originated in the Middle East. I believe it was somewhere near modern day Iran is where kind of the original nomads started out, and Jordan's not that far from there in the Middle East. And I think for me, it was something that was always stitched through our, weekend road trips growing up, going with my family, whether we were going to explore like Wadi Rum or we were doing any sort of like activities over the weekends. The Bedouin tribes and the discussion of the Bedouins and where they were located and things that they were doing and observing them out and about as we were on our hikes or trips throughout southern Jordan. It was something that always fascinated me. And I always found it so fascinating that, they would set up these very elaborate camps that are, organized around kinship and tribal structures and had a really strong emphasis for like hospitality and kind of passing down cultural traditions and things of that nature. That was always to me something that was really interesting, and they chose to navigate life that way. Even though we have like modern day society in Jordan, there was still this very focused group of people that always caught my attention, and I wanted to learn more about them and how they navigated everyday life.
Well, similar for me is in Ireland, and I lived in the suburb of Dublin, the Romanis, the gypsies, occasionally a horse would break loose and suddenly you'd be running down the street and you had this sense of excitement. You had this sense of other, this sense of people living different lives. And it was just so interesting that their structures, they would set up and in a day they could be gone to a different part of the island. One of the things that I find really attractive in modern day world is nomads expanded, they paid attention to nature, the seasons, the environment, the organic nutrition, hydration of different areas, and they would go in those areas to feed their crop, to feed their cattle or their sheep or their horses. And so it wasn't just random like ping pong. They would pay attention to their natural surrounds. One of the things I think is really compelling in today's 21st century is the nomads experienced government, agriculture, laws, land. It started to confine them to break the rhythm of traveling. And today we're at a new horizon for people wanting to get back to going out to nature, getting out of cities, getting out of towns, having that experience of being in nature. With modern day design, what are your thoughts on both the tradition of creating structures for an environment, moving on to another environment? How are you as a designer incorporating the flexibility, the sensuality, the aesthetic awareness of being in nature? How are you folding that in that you've learned from, Bedouins?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still definitely a good amount of people that are holding on to those traditions and are still nomadic and are still, migrating from one area to another and herding animals and navigating life as a, Bedouin within their tribe as modern day society happened, and other people, decided to set up a more, permanent location and, kind of advance in that way. Mm-hmm. There was still this fascination of how the Bedouins were navigating this new, I would call them almost like animal migration patterns, how they were navigating the different landscapes and the different seasons, and still having such a great outlook on all of the different parts that we're navigating through their hardships, and still have like wonderful hospitality. That was kind of one of my experiences with them growing up. And just how thoughtful everything was, and how well planned everything was, even though it seemed like it was just on a moment's notice, which it could be. And I thought that was really fascinating, how they can break down their structures and off they go. And these things were, holding up against harsh desert conditions, and the way that they were mapped out and passed down from one generation to the next. I always thought that to be quite fascinating. And that's why when we were navigating the schematics for our Canvas Canopies project and working with our tent team and navigating how to kind of pull off the geometry and the way that this structural PVC fabric was going to sit.
Can you expound on the Canvas Canopies? So in other words, in the Mojave, you can get 70-mile-an-hour winds. You can get extreme temperatures. There's a harshness there, a beautiful brutality. Can you expand on how you came upon creating these canopies that could endure such extremes?
I think the thought was to pull inspiration from the Bedouins and the origins of Bedouins and their structures, and figuring out a way to implement them to meet modern day United States code, and specifically in California. That was proven to be quite difficult, and still is, as we navigate through the different processes involved with having an architectural PVC fabric tented over an entire structure to become a dwelling. For people to experience through the medium of hospitality. And I think that for me was super challenging to navigate, because we were blurring the lines on so many different elements, from something that's supposed to be movable, but it needed to be grounded and in place to be deemed safe. And there was a lot of different hurdles to work through. And I think that the canopies will blur the line between like what a single family dwelling is, what a hotel suite is, and what a Bedouin tenting experience may feel like.
Now, people can look at an example of your canopies on the website, and they are beautiful. How did you bridge the gap of functionality and form in terms of the way that you have the stitching, the way that it's weighted down, the way that it's angled for aerodynamicness? Can you talk about making a functional structure beautiful? What were your filters in order to make it beautiful yet functional?
Well, we needed to first navigate where they were being placed on the property in the Mojave Desert. That was one of the first steps. And then the second, we needed to understand the wind loads and wind direction. Then we started to think about like, okay, what is considered outside? What is considered inside? What are people seeking shelter from? And what are some areas that you can coexist with them being inside and outside, or be outside but be sheltered. And having that program and working through those kind of big filters, and then from there exploring the idea of symmetry and just something that I've always found really appealing, and how to kind of create this balance in the structure design itself, having them be super low to the ground, having them be as conservative as possible and almost disappear into the landscape, almost like sand dunes placed on the desert. You see just like the mounds kind of go up and then they fall back down, and it's just a blurred line of silhouettes. And so a lot of that was a part of the geometric exploration of what we were doing in our 3D design, and mapping that out with all of the wind load studies and how to navigate those different orientations on site to come up with a very appealing design that was functional but also aesthetically pleasing.
It's interesting to me that you've had such a dynamic response, like companies in South Africa, in the Middle East, are responding to this because they want that adaptive design for their specific elements. What do you find exciting about taking your design and placing it in, South Africa, the Middle East? What's the excitement for you about creating a design that was designed for the Mojave, but is now being attracted to around the world?
Well, I think what's appealing about this concept is that we can take it down and package it in a kit of parts and pack it up and ship it somewhere else, just like the Nomads did, and there's that like nomadic aspect to it, of being able to apply it in a different way and then adjust the canopies accordingly to meet those specific on-site conditions. So I think there's a beauty to that idea of design being able to be applied to different areas and mold itself to that unique environment and that unique context, without it feeling like you're just copying and pasting, but you're really trying to blur the lines between not having to start over, but creating new spaces in different environments with the same principles and design concepts that people were attracted to in the first place. And so I think that to me is really exciting, and in involving that globally and being able to implement those things in an efficient way.
It's important to hear the distinction between glamping and actual architectural aerodynamic design of these canopy structures that you're creating. I mean, I'm looking at a picture right now on your website, and it looks incredibly modern. It also has a hint of the ancient, but it also looks rooted to the ground, yet incredibly inviting in because it's designed in such a modern way. Can you make a distinction for us on people picturing in their head glamping versus your
this has literal HVAC systems in it. The units have fire sprinklers system. Like everything is mapped out as you would a single family residence in a traditional mindset. But this is all within the confines of a 40-foot module. And it services 2 bedrooms. You have a bathroom, shower, kitchenette, and then the living area and dining areas all under the overarching canopy that covers both structures. And it's on this platform. And then that's when you start to get, the open sliders that open out to this platform looking out at the expansive views. And it really just kind of starts to blur the lines between the different spaces you're habitating and utilizing. And so I think it starts to set the tone for differences. It's like you're not really walking into a tent, but you're walking under a tented experience. And then you're entering this module that has all of these different modern day human creature comforts. But then you step out onto the other side, and then you're back outside again, and then you're living outdoors. So it's different experiences all tied into one, and trying to bring the old and the new together in a new filter, in a new way that's approachable, that could be deconstructed and reconstructed.
And adapted.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of those different filters. And of course, as we develop the approach to the design more and really cover the ground further, I think there's even be more efficiencies that we could really tackle and, take and explore more inspiration from the Bedouin tribe, how they navigate their
and also to
survival
create
techniques.
A more specific word picture too is on the roof of the canopy. You matched almost the topographical peaks of the Mojave mountain ranges, that they have this double peak.
Yeah.
You put a lot of thought into that. Tell us about, because a lot of people might be picturing like a tent or this. Can you tell us about what the roof means to the canopy? In other words,
Well,
How
I
did you
think
come up with that design?
Well, it was being inspired by the site first and the environment, and then picturing those sand dunes I was mentioning earlier, and then looking at the sweeping lines and the geometry of the canvas canopy itself, and then also having these oculus openings on the top where hot air can be released as skylights would in a traditional home. To be able to reduce the hot air under the canopy itself, but then the canopy itself also acts as a second skin to the overall structure. And so there's a lot of those types of nuances that people may notice, may not notice as they, circulate through the space and navigate that experience over a weekend stay and enjoying that with their friends or family or a significant other. I think those to me are really fascinating moments in grounding the design, but also showing it in a new way.
Another misnomer is when you think of Bedouin or a Mongolian nomad structure, of it being enclosed, for functional practical purposes. Can you talk about the light, the view, because it's not quite there. This is a modern infusion. Can you explain how you use that indoor-outdoor feeling and then viewpoints? Because it's not a enclosed tent, as it were.
Yeah, it was all about how much we're pulling the tent down to the ground, and the placements of the different viewpoints, and when does it arch up to highlight specific moments, and then come back down to protect against wind. And almost think of it like a car windshield. The aerodynamics of a car windshield as you're driving, it swoops up and up, up the car, and so just thinking through that and having it be lower on that end and then raise in other points to reveal different views or different experiences, and highlighting the stars in the sky and utilizing the desert plants around the canopies and how you're placing the orientation of each structure and the viewpoints you're getting from the inside, but also from the outside. And I think that to me was really important to almost have it be a revealed experience, and you only get bits and pieces of it from the outside or from a distance. It's almost like a desert mirage, just given the fabric and how the color of it and the way that it just blends itself within the landscape. And then as you get closer and closer and closer, you start to see more details. And then as you enter the space, it starts to reveal itself more. So it's this very kind of unassuming approach, and then you realize that you're in this massive structure that's covering quite a lot of space and height.
It's almost 2 stories, isn't it, in height?
Yeah. It's about the height of 2 stories up, but in certain points. And I think that is quite.
And then you have really large windows, then, right, for the viewpoints.
Yeah, in the module we have 9-foot tall windows, 8 feet wide. The sliders are about 12 feet wide. That open out to the deck, so you could really have this indoor-outdoor experience.
It truly is indoor-outdoor, isn't it?
Yeah, and then if you wanted to, close it up and be inside, and it might be a windy day or something, then you could do that and still be comfortable and
enjoy the views.
And enjoy the animals outside through the windows. Or if it's a beautiful day, which most days are. You're outside and you're enjoying the tub, stargazing at night, or hanging out by the campfire. So it's a really experience-based design.
Why do you think people like our colleagues in South Africa and the Middle East are drawn to this? We're talking about the 21st century where you can, have something 3D printed. What do you think the attraction is for people of having a modern infused?
Well, I think people want to get away from the city. People want to get away from the noise, and people want to experience something different than a traditional build, and especially if it's for something like a hospitality stay or somewhere like a hotel or a place to sleep. I think that's a great way for people to explore that. Most people read about certain topics and certain subjects, and they see photos of buildings, photos of places, photos of people and tribes, but they don't really get a sense of that experience firsthand. And this is my way of kind of opening a small window, a small portal into what I was inspired by as a child and my origins and my background and navigating life in Jordan, and being able to, put that out there as part of my work and explain that origin and be able to introduce people to to that experience through my filter. You know what I mean?
It's interesting for me. I have a beautiful penthouse downtown San Diego, beautiful ocean views. But we have the trains and we have the planes and the airport, and it's kind of like you're almost living in Sim City. There's so much going on. And I had the privilege of staying at your Kona estate for a few months, and it was like living in a sound bath where you had the songbirds in the morning and the singing frogs at night, and then the rain falling on these Jurassic-like leaves. And it took me about 3 weeks of being there going, what is that? There's like this nagging thing in the back of my head. And I went, oh, this is peace. This place is peace. And I think from a human design standpoint, I think we've gone all the way to the other side of the pendulum of being in vibrant, dynamic, great restaurants and clubs and nightclubs, and of just this condensed living, which is vibrant and exciting. But I think in our culture, we have this desire to experience the opposite of that to refresh us as well. So not only the vibrancy of dense space, but also letting the space speak to us, nature speak to us. Was that an important thing for you, considering when you were creating these canopies? Like from a sociological standpoint, from a human needs standpoint, what did you want this immersive experience to be for people?
I wanted people to have the ability to navigate and traverse the vast desert landscape that was around these canopies, through hiking, looking up at the stars, looking at the different natural landmarks as their guide, for that time and that stay that they're staying there. And Bedouins have honed their skills over generations, becoming, experts in the desert navigation techniques. And they had their ways of navigating how they're getting around. We have GPS and all of those things, they just really followed the sun and the sunrises and the sunsets and the stars. And I think that's just something to me, the idea of the celestial navigation and the environment, to take on extensive journeys, whether they did that for months at a time, or I guess that's staying at a space that I designed or worked on, is experiencing that for a few days, and I think to me that there's just something very grounding about that experience, and utilizing this canopy as a medium for people to be able to experience those things, and showcasing their adaptability and skills as human beings, and grounding them in ways that you don't really get to experience that in the city. And you kind of forget about, I think is a really beautiful thing.
It's interesting to me that I think from a design standpoint, a lot of people have, plots of land, or you've been having people reach out to you about creating a shelter, creating spaces. What do you think the desire for people is to take a pre-existing piece of land that maybe has been their family for a long time, or they bought a plot of land? What are they looking for from you?
Well-designed spaces, not massive square footage, really thought out design concepts, and getting people, I think, in today's society, and at least the people that I've interacted with and have reached out to me, really are interested in finding what are the most efficient ways to utilize a space, from living, dining, eating, sleeping, and how can we get unique experiences out of those small spaces where, before there would be kind of like frowned upon to have such a small space, more square footage meant more luxury, but really sometimes just large spaces could be so daunting and so uncomfortable, because you just feel like you're either, they don't feel cozy. It's hard to make them feel comfortable, and the scale is off. And so I think for me, it's like finding that balance between what those potential clients or clients are looking for in a program, and figuring out the most unique way possible to have different experiences within the same space, while giving them the square footage they need, and showing them that there are like new ways to navigate space and how to live in a smaller square footage, get the program that they want and they need, and be able to do that in different environments or different contexts and different regions, and having the outcome be so unique and different, yet very approachable and usable.
Another thing to talk about is from a sustainability standpoint. Like I have a friend, they have 17 homes. So you think, oh, they have tremendous freedom. And then I realized the sheer weight of logistical management. And they, in fact, have a team that they've hired to handle these 17 spaces. Can you talk about the spaces that you designed where the door gets locked and nothing needs to be worked on? And
well, it's all about